You've tried reasoning. You've tried setting boundaries. You've even given second, third, and maybe fourth chances. But deep down, you know, this relationship is slowly draining your peace. It's not one big blow-up that makes you feel this way. It's the constant small cuts, the passive-aggressive comments, the guilt trips, the way you feel exhausted after spending time together. And yet, walking away feels impossible. The thought of it makes your stomach tighten. You wonder, am I overreacting? Will I regret this? What if I'm being selfish? Here's the truth. Ending a toxic relationship isn't about being selfish. It's about preserving your sanity. And for thousands of years, the Stoics, ancient philosophers from Greece and Rome, have had a framework for exactly this. A way to step away without guilt, without unnecessary drama, and without second-guessing your worth. In the next few minutes, you'll learn that framework. You'll see why the Stoics believed protecting your mind is just as important as protecting your body. You'll learn how to recognize the real damage being done, how to make the decision without being swept away by emotion, and how to walk away with calm dignity instead of messy resentment. This isn't pop psychology fluff. These are principles people have used for centuries to decide, calmly and rationally, who they let into their lives. And if you follow them, you might just find that letting go can be the most freeing act of self-respect you ever choose. 1. Understand what the Stoics meant by toxic. When we talk about toxic relationships today, it's a fairly new word to describe people who drain your energy, hurt your self-esteem, or pull you away from peace. But the Stoics never used the word toxic. That's a modern label. Instead, what the Stoics focused on were people who disturb your inner virtue and calm, those who lead you away from living a good life, guided by wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. For them, the real problem wasn't just bad behavior, it was the way some people consistently pull you off your path toward tranquility and moral goodness. Epictetus, one of the most practical Stoics, taught that your mind is your kingdom, and letting someone else invade it unchecked is like handing over your throne. He said, to avoid those who are morally corrupt, or who continually act out of anger, deceit, or selfishness, because their influence infects your own character. Marcus Aurelius, another Stoic emperor, reminded himself daily to be wary of the man who is not faithful to himself and who betrays his principles, because associating with such people drags you down. This is where it gets important to separate two types of difficult people in your life. On one hand, there are challenging people, those who push your buttons, test your patience, and make you grow through adversity. They force you to practice patience, forgiveness, or resilience. That's a good kind of challenge. Think of a strict but caring teacher who pushes you to be better. On the other hand, there are destructive people, those who repeatedly disrespect your boundaries, belittle you, or cause emotional harm without genuine care for your well-being. These people don't encourage growth. Instead, they drain your mental energy and pull you away from your better self. They might be manipulators, chronic complainers, or emotionally unavailable. For the Stoics, the question isn't, how much should I tolerate, but rather, does this person help or hinder my pursuit of virtue? If the answer is hinder, then they're not just difficult, they're harmful. Take, for example, a friend who constantly criticizes your choices, not constructively, but in a way that leaves you doubting your worth. They complain about everything, refuse to listen, and never take responsibility. Spending time with them might leave you feeling anxious or exhausted. This person fits the Stoic warning about those who pull you away from tranquility. The Stoics weren't about cutting off everyone who challenges us or who disagrees. Life will always have its tough moments and difficult people. But they urged careful attention to those who systematically undermine your peace and virtue, because your inner character is the foundation for everything else in life. If that foundation is shaky, no amount of external success or approval will bring lasting happiness. So, understanding what the Stoics meant by toxic helps you see the bigger picture. It's not just about one bad argument or occasional annoyance. It's about the steady erosion of your inner calm and your ability to act wisely. In the next section, we'll explore how to recognize the early warning signs before you get too deep into these harmful relationships. Because catching these patterns early is key to protecting your peace and making calm, clear decisions. 2. Recognize the warning signs early. Recognizing toxic relationships early can feel tricky, especially because we often want to believe the best in people. We hope things will improve, or that maybe we're just overreacting. The Stoics, however, teach us to be honest and practical about the patterns we see, and to trust our inner sense of peace or unrest as a vital signal. The Stoics didn't have the language of toxic, but they were keen observers of human behavior and warned about recurring patterns that disturb the mind and soul. Epictetus said that wise people avoid those who manipulate or deceive because their influence spreads like poison, harming your own ability to reason and stay virtuous. So, what are the warning signs? What behaviors indicate someone might be pulling you away from your peace of mind? One major sign is manipulation. This could be subtle, like guilt-tripping you for your decisions, or more overt, such as twisting your words or emotions to get what they want. The manipulator rarely respects your boundaries and often leaves you feeling confused or responsible for their feelings. Another red flag is constant criticism. That isn't constructive, but meant to tear you down. This isn't about honest feedback or helping you grow. It's about making you doubt yourself, feel small, or question your worth. Over time, this relentless negativity chips away at your confidence and self-respect. Then there's boundary violations. These happen when someone consistently ignores your needs, disrespects your limits, or refuses to honor your requests for space or respect. For example, if you say you need time alone and they pressure you to respond immediately or show up uninvited, that's a clear boundary violation. The Stoics understood that these patterns rarely change overnight, if at all, because they're tied to a person's character, which is shaped by habits and inner beliefs. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to expect that some people simply won't change, no matter how much you hope otherwise. So the question isn't whether the toxic behavior is temporary or accidental, it's whether it's repeated, and whether the person shows willingness to reflect and improve. If not, it's a warning to protect your peace. Another crucial part of spotting toxicity is tuning into your own emotional state. The Stoics believed your inner life is your true guide. If you consistently feel anxious, exhausted, or disrespected after interacting with someone, that's a sign your mind is sending you a clear message. For instance, you might notice your chest tightens before a call, or you dread seeing a certain person. You might find yourself replaying conversations over and over, worrying about what you said or what they might say next. These emotional responses are not just inconveniences, they're warnings. Loss of self-respect is another sign. If someone treats you in ways that make you feel lesser, and you start accepting behavior you once wouldn't have tolerated, that's a red flag. The Stoics emphasized the importance of maintaining your dignity, because once you start accepting disrespect, it becomes easier for others to walk all over you. Importantly, the Stoics teach that awareness is power. Early recognition of these patterns lets you decide calmly and wisely before you get too entangled. It's like noticing a small crack in the foundation early enough to prevent the whole structure from collapsing. If you catch these signs, it's time to pause and reflect. Not react out of fear or anger, but to take a step back and ask, is this relationship helping me grow into a better person, or is it pulling me away from the peace and virtue I want to live by? In the next section, we'll talk about how to clarify your inner values so that when it's time to make decisions about these relationships, you're grounded not in emotion, but in reason and purpose. 3. Clarify your inner values before you act. When you're stuck in a draining relationship, emotions run high. You might feel anger, guilt, sadness, or even hope that things will change. It's easy to get caught up in those feelings and make decisions based on impulse or revenge, which almost always leads to regret. The Stoics teach us a better way. Before taking any action, clarify your inner values and let those guide you. At the heart of Stoicism is the idea that true peace and happiness come from living a virtuous life. Virtue means acting with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control, not being led around by emotional storms. So, when you think about ending or changing a relationship, ask yourself, will continuing this relationship make me a better, wiser, calmer person? This question isn't about judging the other person harshly or deciding whether they deserve your kindness. It's about focusing on you, your growth, your serenity, and your moral character. Sometimes the hardest thing is choosing what's best for your soul, even when it means letting go of people you care about. One powerful tool the Stoics recommend is journaling or quiet reflection. Writing down your thoughts helps separate the noise of emotion from the clear voice of reason. You can ask yourself, what are the real benefits of this relationship? What am I sacrificing? Am I holding on out of fear, habit, or guilt, or because it truly enriches my life and helps me become a better person? This kind of reflection helps you avoid common traps like impulse decisions. Walking away in the heat of anger or staying out of guilt or obligation. It creates space for calm, deliberate choices. For example, maybe you realize that when you're around this person, your anxiety spikes and you lose patience easily. You notice that your kindness feels drained, replaced with frustration. On the other hand, when you spend time alone or with supportive friends, you feel calmer and more yourself. This contrast shows you where your values are calling you, toward peace and strength, not turmoil. The Stoics also remind us to be compassionate with ourselves during this process. It's natural to feel conflicted or sad about ending a relationship. Virtue isn't about being cold or unfeeling, it's about being wise with your heart. Reflecting helps you recognize these feelings without letting them dictate your choices. One ancient Stoic practice is to imagine how you'll feel looking back at this decision in a year or 5 years. Will you be proud that you stood up for your peace and values? Or will you regret staying trapped in something that hurt you? This long-term perspective helps anchor your decisions in virtue, not short-term emotion. Finally, clarifying your values before acting also strengthens your resolve. When you know why you're making a decision, because it aligns with your highest self and leads to growth, it's easier to withstand doubts and second-guessing. So before you have difficult conversations, before you make big moves, take time to reflect deeply. Let your values light the way. Ask, what choice helps me live wisely, calmly, and justly? In the next section, we'll explore how to detach from the emotional traps that often keep us stuck, guilt, nostalgia, and fear, and how Stoic practices can help you let go without bitterness or cruelty. 4. Detach from the emotional traps. One of the hardest parts about ending a toxic relationship isn't the decision itself, it's the emotional weight that pulls you back in. Guilt, nostalgia, fear. These feelings create invisible chains, keeping you stuck even when you know deep down that walking away is the right choice. The Stoics understood these emotional traps well and offered powerful ways to detach without becoming cold or bitter. First, let's talk about guilt. It's common to feel guilty for putting your needs first or for hurting someone else's feelings, even if they've been harming you emotionally. Guilt can whisper things like, maybe I didn't try hard enough, or what if they really change? The Stoics remind us that guilt is often an unnecessary burden when you've acted in line with virtue. Virtue means acting justly and wisely, not sacrificing your well-being to appease others. Epictetus said, "If you have done wrong, it is because you have made a choice, and you are responsible for that choice." But he also recognized that if you make a decision to protect your peace and live rightly, that is your duty, not something to feel guilty about. Then there's my nostalgia. the tendency to romanticize the good moments or hope for a return to how things used to be. It's easy to forget the repeated patterns of pain when you focus on rare, happy memories. The Stoics practiced something called negative visualization, which means intentionally imagining the worst-case scenarios or the flaws in a situation so you don't get blinded by false hope. By remembering the full picture, the struggles, the disappointments, you free yourself from the trap of nostalgia. You see things clearly, with both the good and the bad in balance. Fear is another powerful emotional trap. Fear of loneliness, fear of change, fear of the unknown. It's natural to fear leaving a relationship because humans crave connection and stability. But Marcus Aurelius urged himself to face every day as if it were your last, to remind himself that clinging to comfort at the expense of virtue isn't true safety. The Stoics taught us to embrace uncertainty as an opportunity to practice courage and adaptability rather than a threat to be feared. So how do you actually detach from these emotional traps in daily life? One practice is to zoom out and view your life from a larger perspective. Imagine yourself years from now, looking back on this moment. How will you feel about the choices you make today? This distance helps reduce the intensity of current emotions and puts your suffering into context. It's temporary and part of a larger journey. Another powerful Stoic tool is memento mori, the reminder that life is finite and unpredictable. This isn't meant to scare you, but to encourage you to focus on what truly matters, living in accordance with your values and preserving your peace. When you keep death and impermanence in mind, petty dramas lose their grip, and you realize that holding on to toxic ties wastes precious time. Importantly, detaching doesn't mean you stop caring about the other person or dehumanize them. Stoicism is not about coldness or cruelty. It's about loving yourself enough to step back while still wishing the other person well. You can recognize that someone may be suffering or flawed without letting their pain consume your own life. For example, you might think, "I wish they could change," or "I hope they find peace someday," but you also accept that their path is not your responsibility. You set firm boundaries to protect yourself, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. When you practice these detachment techniques, you create space for healing and growth. You no longer feel tangled in guilt, nostalgia, or fear. Instead, you reclaim your mind and heart, freeing yourself to move forward with clarity. In the next section, we'll explore how to communicate with dignity and calm when it's time to have those difficult conversations, showing how Stoic principles can help you speak your truth without drama or blame. 5. Communicate with dignity and calm. When it comes to ending or setting firm boundaries in a difficult relationship, communication is often the toughest hurdle. The stakes feel high, emotions can run wild, and there's always the risk of backlash, anger, guilt-tripping, or drama that drags you back in. The Stoics offer a powerful approach. Speak with dignity, calm, and clarity, without blame or unnecessary conflict. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about controlling one's reactions, especially speech. He reminded himself that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In other words, even when someone treats you poorly, your response should reflect your values, wisdom, patience, and self-control, not their worst behavior. So, how do you prepare for a difficult conversation in a Stoic way? First, plan your message clearly. Know what you want to say and why. Avoid vague or emotional statements. Instead of saying, "You always hurt me," try to say, "I feel hurt when my boundaries aren't respected." This shifts the focus from blame to your own feelings and needs, which makes it harder for the other person to argue or manipulate. Keep your tone calm and steady. Even if you feel nervous or angry inside, practice speaking slowly and evenly. The more composed you sound, the less likely the other person will escalate the situation. Here's a practical script you can adapt. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship and what I need to be at my best. I realize that for my peace of mind and growth, I need to step back from our interactions. This isn't about blaming you, but about taking care of myself. I hope you understand." This kind of statement is firm but respectful. It doesn't invite debate or guilt, but sets a clear boundary. During the conversation, be prepared for common tactics like manipulation or guilt tripping. For example, they might say, "After everything I've done for you, you're just walking away?" Or, "You're being selfish." The Stoics would remind you these are emotional attacks, not truths. You can acknowledge feelings without accepting blame. "I understand you feel hurt, but I'm making this decision for my well-being." Another technique is to pause before responding. Don't rush to defend or explain yourself. Silence can be powerful and prevent escalation. It also gives you time to stay grounded in your values rather than reacting impulsively. If the other person refuses to respect your boundary or becomes aggressive, it's okay to end the conversation politely but firmly. You might say, "I think it's best if we continue this discussion another time when we're both calmer," or simply, "I'm going to step away now." Remember, communication isn't about winning an argument. It's about expressing your truth with integrity. The Stoics valued reason over emotion and believed in focusing on what you can control, your words and actions, not on trying to change others. After the conversation, take time to care for yourself. Reflect on how it went, reaffirm your values, and remind yourself that maintaining dignity and calm was the highest victory you could achieve. In the next section, we'll talk about standing firm after you walk away, how to resist second-guessing and maintain your resolve with daily Stoic habits. 6. Stand firm after you walk away. Walking away from a toxic relationship is never easy. Even after you've made the decision and had the conversation, doubts often creep in. You start wondering, did I do the right thing? Maybe I was too harsh. Or, what if they really change this time? This second-guessing is natural, but the Stoics warn it's also dangerous. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to focus on what's within his control. The choice to walk away was yours, and now it's time to own it without wavering. When you start doubting yourself, you give power back to the very chaos you fought to escape. One way to stand firm is to build daily habits that reinforce your values and your resolve. The Stoics practiced up meditation on virtues every day. This means reflecting on the qualities you want to embody: wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. Each morning, remind yourself why you chose peace over pain, growth over stagnation. Surrounding yourself with wise and supportive people is another key. The Stoics believed that the company you keep shapes your character. Seek out friends or mentors who respect your boundaries and inspire you to be your best self. Their encouragement will help silence the inner critic that tries to pull you back into toxic patterns. Redirect your energy toward meaningful goals. When your focus is on building a life that reflects your values, whether it's learning a new skill, pursuing a passion, or contributing to others, you naturally have less mental space for old toxic ties. This forward momentum is a powerful antidote to emotional relapse. Speaking of relapse, be aware of the temptation to re-engage with toxic individuals. Maybe they reach out with apologies or promises to change. The Stoics advise caution here. People can change, but it takes consistent effort over time, and it's not your responsibility to be their motivation. If re-entry threatens your peace, remind yourself of the reasons you walked away. Daily journaling can also anchor your resolve. Write down your progress, your challenges, and your reflections on virtue. This practice rewires your mental habits and keeps your focus sharp. Remember, standing firm is not about stubbornness or bitterness. It's about self-respect and commitment to a better path. It's about saying, "I deserve peace and I'm choosing it, no matter what." In this way, every day after you walk away becomes a small victory, a step toward freedom and wisdom. In the next section, we'll explore how to grow stronger from this experience, turning what feels like an ending into the start of a new, empowered chapter. 7. Grow stronger from the experience. Ending a toxic relationship can feel like a loss, even a failure, but the Stoics invite us to see it differently. not as an ending, but as a moral exercise, a powerful step in your growth as a human being. Marcus Aurelius wrote that every obstacle we face is an opportunity to practice virtue. In the case of toxic relationships, the challenge is to practice courage, wisdom, and self-respect. Walking away isn't just about removing pain, it's about saying yes to a better version of yourself. One way to grow stronger is to reflect on the lessons this experience has taught you. What did you learn about your own boundaries? About the kind of people you want in your life? About your patterns of tolerance and self-worth? These lessons become tools to protect yourself in the future. Pain, while unpleasant, is often our greatest teacher. The Stoics remind us to welcome challenges, not because we enjoy suffering, but because they push us to develop inner strength. When you look back on this chapter with that perspective, you might be surprised to see how much resilience you've built. Another powerful Stoic insight is the idea that every ending is also a new beginning. When you close one door, you make space for new experiences, new relationships, and new growth. Instead of focusing on what's lost, focus on what's possible. It's also important to practice self-compassion. During this time, growth isn't linear. You might feel moments of doubt or sadness, and that's okay. The Stoics didn't expect perfection, only persistent effort. Treat yourself with the same kindness and patience you would offer a close friend. Surround yourself with supportive people who encourage your growth and help you see your value clearly. Consider journaling regularly to track your progress and reaffirm your commitment to living virtuously. Finally, remember that your worth is not defined by who stays or leaves. The Stoics teach that true value comes from within, from your character and your choices. Choosing peace over toxicity is one of the highest acts of self-respect you can make. So embrace this experience as a powerful turning point. Use it to build a life aligned with your deepest values and truest self. Walking away can be an act of self-respect and wisdom. The question isn't just who you let go of, it's who you become afterward. If this video helped you find clarity or courage, try the Stoic 2 columns exercise. List what you control and what you don't control in your relationships. Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you're applying these ideas. Remember, protecting your peace is not selfish. It's essential. Thank you for watching.